I'm Alex.
And I'm Teddy.
And we are
The Button Mappers.
Hey, the Button Mappers. Buttons.
SEGA buttons.
Buttons.
Welcome to the Button Mapper Show, where we discourse on the discourse.
It's welcome to my Litz map of the SEGA Genesis.
Hooray.
Oh, God.
This is feeling very SEGA already, if you know what I mean.
It's because we're rebels, and SEGA were rebels when they released the SEGA Genesis.
It was. I guess you could call it a Genesis.
A Genesis. It was the Genesis.
It was the Genesis of the rebels. Anyways, we're the Button Mappers, and we're here to talk about the SEGA Genesis.
SEGA Genesis. We got beer. We got Genesis. What else do you need?
Yeah, that's all you can ask for in life.
Teddy, when I say I'm playing the SEGA, what do you think of?
Genesis.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you don't think of like the Saturn or the Game Gear.
Well, in your case, I might think the Game Gear.
Well, not right now. Both my Game Gears are dead, but it's just generally you think of the Genesis, and that's like the SEGA console, and there's a reason for that.
So maybe you could tell me some of the reasons. What makes the Genesis the Genesis?
Well, it was like, okay, let's set the scene. Like the NES was out, they were the top dogs. Like Atari's dead, ColecoVision's dead, Intellivision's dead. Like Nintendo's number one. Well, at least here in the States. I know the Master System did pretty well in like Europe and stuff, I believe. But at least here in the States, like Nintendo is the top dog. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing these like ad campaigns for this like new SEGA console with more graphics, and it was like they're like dissing Nintendo, and they're bursting onto the scene, and like they're the new kids on the block,
New kids on the block.
They were really like trying to put up a fight, and that's why I think a lot of people really remember the Genesis, because it was like this brand new, like like Nintendo's for kids. Look at us,
Insert ad campaign here.
Yeah. Insert any SEGA Genesis commercial pretty much ever.
Any. So that's how the world remembers the SEGA Genesis, but how do you remember it?
I remember it as the thing that I associated with Sonic the Hedgehog for the longest time of my childhood. Because whenever I got my Genesis, I bought it at a yard sale. No joke, for $3. My Model 1 that I still use today, I bought it for $3 with a copy of Sonic 1 and Quackshot.
Wow.
Those were my only two games, and I bought it with my own money because I remember being at a yard sale and being like, "Oh my god!" So I don't know if the guy was just selling it to me because he was nice and he made it $3 because that's I was a kid, didn't really have money, or if that's actually what he was selling it for. But I got it. I went home and I fucking loved it ever since.
I would fucking love it for those same reasons too. I mean, that's a great start to the SEGA, and also especially to associate with it today. My memories are similar, not so similar. I actually just played it at a friend's house when I was about maybe 6 or 7 years old. I know we used to go on his computer, and we used to play a computer version of Asteroids, the same one that was on the Atari. So when I saw his first home console was the Genesis, and the three games that he had that we played were Sonic 3, Earthworm Jim, and Vectorman, and also Tiny Toons. I was so blown away by all of them. It was just unlike other games I had played. I had seen Star Fox 64 played. I had seen a Final Fantasy game, but these games were special.
Yeah, the SEGA Genesis has its own special quirks and style, I would say. Like, when you're playing something on the Genesis, it feels right. It feels like a Genesis game.
What was the years of the Genesis? Do you know them offhand?
Okay, so I know Sonic 1 came out in 91, so but the Genesis launched before that, so maybe 89?
89 is correct, because that would be Altered Beast.
Okay, so yeah, 89 to whenever the hell they stopped making them. Which is
Would you count the 32X and Sega CD years as part of the Genesis lifespan?
Definitely. Because, I mean, while they were add-ons, you still needed the console. You know, you still needed the Genesis to enjoy the other add-ons. They were just, they were like built upon the console. So.
That's fair. So I believe Saturn was what, 95?
Yeah. Saturn was 95. But they kept producing Genesis or Genocide. Genocide. They kept.
I would prefer to call it the Genesis. Thank you.
Genesis. they produced Genesises after the Saturn was out though, because they did like the Model 3, and then they kept doing. I mean, you can even say they still do it today with like the At Games one they did and stuff that plays cartridges like.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it never really died.
Yeah, there were like 5 homebrew games. It's not as significant as the Atari, but they do exist today.
Was it? I only think of like Pure Solar. Like that's one, right?
Well, that is, but there's also the Super Fighter team, which brings a couple of RPGs and then some oddball fighters to the system.
Okay. I think Gunlord maybe. I think was one too.
The Dreamcast gets a lot of the love.
Was that Dreamcast?
I think so.
I don't remember. I wasn't super into the homebrew scene whenever those games were coming out. So I wouldn't know. But I am super into the second fucking Genesis, dude.
Hell yeah! Tell me why.
My favorite console of all time because it's got some of the greatest games of all time.
What do you associate with that list?
You know what? As much as my brain wants to be like, oh, it's Sonic, whenever you say Genesis to me, I think of Altered Beast. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think of the startup music. I think of Wise from the Old Wave.
Wise from the Old Wave.
and I think of other games. I think of Golden Axe. I think of Comic Zone. Super Hang On. What is your association? Like, what do you think of when I say Genesis?
Disney titles.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. You had said Quackshot before, so I mean, like that was one of my first Genesis games. I do think of your spaceship shooters, which is not a genre that you get to see a lot of representation for on a console.
What are your favorites?
I guess this is, I haven't actually finished many on the system, but I really do appreciate Steel Empire. It's not my favorite shooter by any means, but it's one that I finished and that I think plays well. There's also an amazing 3DS port of it, or I guess you would call it a remaster or something.
Yeah.
But it's a significant and fun game with a unique style. You had mentioned that word before. The Thunder Force series gets a lot of cred. I beat Thunder Force 3 last year. That game is phenomenal, albeit, a bit challenging, and I don't think it's as good as its sequel, Lightning Force. But those games just ooze with this sense of, I don't know what it is. It's like heavy metal style shooting. You got some like massive creatures. You got these super cool upgrades. You got your lasers. You got Hunter. Hunter is your homing missile. You got this like computer style voice that will announce every time you get an upgrade. Hunter. And it always kind of it makes me feel like I'm the pilot.
And of course,
like Battle, Gaiaris. Anyways, go on.
I was just gonna bring up the fact that we mentioned Sonic, which I don't want to talk too much about Sonic because it's Sonic. Everyone knows what the hell Sonic is,
and everyone who has a Genesis has played 1 through 3 and possibly Knuckles.
Yeah, but Sonic really birthed this era of way past cool platformer characters that maybe lasted through the PS2 era, possibly. It really started to bring the animal mascots, And one of my favorites on the Genesis is Rocket Knight. I fucking love Rocket Knight. That game is a classic. That game has such
Tell me why.
It's just so unique with its gameplay because you have the ability to charge your rocket pack to get a boost jump, which clears the whole screen. So that makes actual platforming a non-issue. And also, you know, like you have your sword, which can shoot out like a little beam type thing to like hit enemies, and it almost turns it from a platformer into like other genres. Like sometimes, like there's some like missions that are like almost like a spaceship shooter. You know,
I think there are. Yeah, they are actually spaceship shooters.
Yeah,
stages.
like it's a very unique platformer game that I think really holds up on the Genesis.
There's actually a couple elements to that game that I would also expand on. You know, I played most of it. I never finished the final boss, but one is the music.
Yeah, it's good.
Music has got that like significant reverb. Or
it's got a Genesis twang.
It's got that twang. Yeah, we call it the twang here on the button mappers.
The twang.
The twang. It sounds good, and it sounds really cool for what's like a little rat in armor.
Yeah. And that game is really boss heavy too. Like really boss heavy. Like I would argue there's more boss fights than there are platforming stages, which might sound off-putting, but like you think about games like Cuphead today, like that's what that game is boss fights over platforming areas, you know.
And some significant cutscenes. Like I guess you wouldn't call them cutscenes, maybe they are, but like I remember like a building crumbling, and then like, you know, he launches off into space.
Yeah, and it's just such a unique game, and I think that's like a lot of what those platformers from that era had like really got right. It was like that game, and you mentioned Earthworm Jim earlier. Like that game was really unique. Like those,
pain in the ass, but it's unique.
Pain in the ass, yes. That game is hard, but definitely unique.
Yeah, platformers, man. There were some rivals. Like the Super Nintendo was rivaled here.
Yeah, and of course, you know, Sonic with Sonic, but they also had Rystar.
Rystar, right? I always think Vector Man. You know, I always,
Vector Man's good too.
I was super into Vector Man. I would say that's the country rival.
Yeah, well, the graphical style definitely. But it's more of like a run and gun game too. It's like a run and gun shooter. It's good though.
But it still has the photons and the collection aspect. It has the large scope in the levels. I think Country is better personally, of course, but
yeah,
you know, Vector Man is still super cool.
Yeah, like Vector Man's a game that I would definitely recommend for like any owner of the console still.
Sonic is obviously your Mario rival because he does what Nintendo don't.
Do you know what else I think honestly kind of rivals Mario? Kid Chameleon. Kid Chameleon.
Okay.
That's a good game. That's a good platformer too.
It's edgy.
It's got unique power-ups. It's got a unique setup where you're in like a virtual reality game. It's really fun.
I remember starting it on one of those Genesis Classics collections, which maybe we could talk about later in the video. But I thought it was interesting, and it had its own unique premise, and it's its own unique platformer too. Like for some reason, that genre seems to be really good on this console.
Of course, you know, like you mentioned the Disney games like Quackshot, the Castle of Illusion. That's a great game. Lion King's a great platformer. Like they definitely had a lot of like licensed games too, and that's back when licensed games weren't just bullshit.
Yeah, really.
Back whenever licensed games like actually tried to be good.
Despite that, I'd say there is some bullshit on the console. I hate to say it. Can you name any?
Balls, 3D fighting at its ballsiest.
Yeah. Arrow the Acrobat.
Yeah, Bubsy.
Bubs. My boy Bubs.
Bubsy is. There's
some rough games. Terrible game.
Iggy and the Quest for the Olympic Rings.
Jeez.
I have that. Yeah, they definitely. Everybody and their mom wanted to make a cool '90s game.
Yeah, really.
The beat 'em ups though. There were a lot of beat 'em ups too.
Yeah, you said Golden Axe before.
Yeah.
Was Turtles is on here? Hyperstone Heist?
Yeah, Turtles, Streets of Rage, Alien Storm. I think there's Battletoads Double Dragon.
Battletoads, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
5, right? I mean, for a beat 'em up genre, though, I understand it. Another thing is, like, despite there being some junk on here, like, there is definitely some junk. Like, I'm not going to forgive it. I recognize that, first off, this is old, right? This is older than either of us. Second is that they had the quality control to make up for it. When I think of the Sega Genesis, I don't think of those shitty games. But when I think of the Wii, I think of some shitty games.
Yeah, when I think of Sega Genesis, I think of the classics, or I even think of like some of the like third-party games, like Samurai Showdown or Street Fighter 2. You know.
I'm looking at the top selling list, and it's not as big as the Super Nintendo's list. Not nearly as many had sold more than 1 million. So when you look up the lists on Wikipedia, it caps at games that don't sell over 1 million. But most of them are not Sega games.
What's the list?
Well, so you got Sonic 1 and 2 top on the charts at 15 million and 6 million. Which, I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog outsells Super Smash Bros. Melee times 2.
Well, it was a pack-in.
True. But Sonic 2, it pretty much competes with it. So that's impressive. Aladdin is next, followed by Sonic 3 and Sonic Knuckles. I don't know how that works, so maybe they're combining things. I can't actually comment on that. NBA Jam.
Ooh, that's a fun game.
It is a fun game. I like playing that. I'm not a sports game fan. Mortal Kombat 2.
Ooh, yeah, Mortal Kombat games had all the gore on the Genesis.
Right, and that's another reason like the Genesis was holding its candle.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
So we have 2 fighting games back to back. Altered Beast. Mortal Kombat 3. Jurassic Park.
I've actually haven't played that one.
I haven't either. I've heard good things though. Miss Pac-Man.
Ooh, Waka Waka Waka.
NFL 98.
My favorite.
NFL 94.
My second favorite.
Sonic Spinball.
Oh, dude, Sonic Spinball is so good. Sorry. I just had to rant for a second.
For Dragon's Revenge. But anyways. X-Men.
Yeah. Yeah, X-Men, yeah.
X-Women. No, I'm joking. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Don't know.
Well, that's where the list ends.
Oh, okay.
So this is about split.
Yeah, there's some good stuff, and there's some licensed games on there too. That should tell you the quality, man. What do you think about the Sega Genesis controller?
Oh man, some people will rag on this. I think it's very comfortable. It's smooth, shaped like a boomerang. So that's cool.
3 buttons.
You know, if somebody's annoying you and you're playing a game and you're like, "Ma, go away," and you just
Ma,
the controller. You know, like it's pretty easy to disconnect and then just
Ma,
like whack
go
it
away.
and then like have it come back to you. But anyways, I wouldn't do that to my mother.
I'm playing the Sega Genesis.
No?
I'm trying to play the Sega Genesis, Ma.
Trying to play my Genesis.
The 3-button or 6-button?
Personally, it's 3-button for me, but I can use a 6-button. How do you feel about it?
I like both. I wish the 3-button controllers had longer cords.
That's fair.
So I find myself using 6-button just for the ease of having a longer cord, but the 3-button still feels really nice.
Yeah. I think they're both solid as long as you're not getting some kind of knockoff controller.
Yeah, as long as you're not getting a knockoff, because those tend not to last very long.
What are some standout titles in your personal library for the console? And maybe you could just talk about your personal library for it as well.
Okay, so my favorite Genesis game is probably Sonic 2. That's there, because Sonic 2 is a fucking classic, and everybody and their mom should play that game. And then I like Super Hang-On a whole bunch. That's a really good arcade-style racing game. I like the Wonder Boy and Monster World games. Monster World 4 being the best. Those games are so fucking good. Even though you can't really like play that one because it was Japanese only, but if you have a chance to play it, it's good. I'm trying to think of what else is even on my list, man. There's so many good Genesis games. Fuck.
It's a little tough to do off the
yeah. I like Shining Force. I love Shining Force. It's a good game.
Yeah, I know you're a Shining fan.
Yeah, I'm a Shining fan. I shine on through. Shinobi 3 is the best.
Yeah.
Better than Revenge of Shinobi. I'm gonna always sing that game's praises.
You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I picked a few just to bring in here. First off, I want to just give a shout out to Outrun 2019 because we're in the year 2019.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that game.
So there are 3 Outruns for the console. I don't own
Outrunners?
The original Outrun, but I have Outrunners and Outrun 2019.
Okay.
But I've experienced Outrun through the Nintendo 3DS, and I love it. Terrific game. Outrunners is cool. I've yet to play Outrun 2019. But those are examples of racing games or just driving games, I guess, that Yu Suzuki had liked to call it, that are just fun.
Super Hang-On too.
Yeah, they're fun. Super Hang-On is another classic, like you had said. I saw your SEGA Genesis 6-pack video like 7 years ago or 6 years ago, and I remember how, classic Super Hang-On had looked from that. I love Super Monaco GP, which is another good driving game.
Oh! You know what else is a good driving game? Lotus Turbo.
I hope it's not hard driving.
Lotus Turbo Challenge.
You enjoy that?
Yeah, it's kind of hard, but it's fun.
Don't they have like Mario Andretti racing as well?
I don't know why. I thought you were gonna say, don't they have Mario in that one? I was like,
talk about a rival console. You got Mario? Well, we got Mario Andretti.
See, they had Mario.
See, even Sega does what Nintendo can. They also had Pink. Pink Goes to Hollywood.
Oh no, the classic.
The classic, the
Pink
license
Goes to
game.
Hollywood.
Talk about the memories.
Oh Lord.
That was an inside joke between us for a long time.
Yeah. What are your other games?
Well, to me, it's like if I'm picking up my Genesis, I'm going to put in a copy of one of the Sonic games and play it. In fact, I may just spend a whole week playing all 3 of them.
I feel like we keep going back to Sonic.
It's odd because, yeah, the library is so much more expansive than just that. Like, you do have your pinball games. You got 2 Dragons games, Dragon's Fury and Dragon's Revenge, although it's hard to finish either one of them. I do like my Vector Mans. I had mentioned that before, but you really do have your sports games and your driving games. You have NHL. The NHL games on the Sega Genesis are terrific.
Yeah, I'm not
you have your shooters, but again, they're hard. I think like a big thing here is that Sega Genesis games are just hard.
Yeah, well, it's just like whenever I think of like the Super Nintendo, I think of like the first party games, of course, and then like beyond that, I think of like Final Fantasy, and like those games. And but when I think of the Genesis, it's like I think of all kinds of different genres of games. I think of like you said, the sports games are really popular, driving games, beat 'em ups, like platformers, like shooters, like there's pinball games. Like it just feels like there's just like an open like selection on the Genesis,
Minus some RPGs, which you could argue Phantasy Star and maybe Landstalker.
Phantasy Star, Landstalker, and Shining Force. But yeah, beyond that, there's not really that many RPGs to pick from.
What has primarily influenced the way that you think about the Genesis? I know that's a tough question, but take a moment on it.
I think it's maybe whenever like the retro gaming really got really popular, okay, and everybody was talking about the NES, the SNES, and the people that really tended to talk about the Sega Genesis were people that were kind of in the same mindset as me, and the Genesis has always had like a cheaper price tag anyway, so it's like the affordable retro gaming console, It's yeah, and I feel like there's like a lot of people that like play Genesis and talk about Genesis aren't like the YouTubers that are like, I have a Nintendo World Championship cart,
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I guess I hadn't even considered that, so I was really interested to hear your take. It really is guys like Mark for me, the old timers and people who are like a little bit different, not your just conventional Nintendo YouTubers. I was actually going to say compilations.
Ooh, compilations are good too. Those are a great way to get into the library.
It's also influenced the way that I think about the library because they're very particular about what they put on them.
Yeah, I mean, only till recently have they really started to try to open it up a little bit more and put on some of the more obscure games or like some of the different games. But there for a while, it was definitely like Sonic, Altered Beast, Golden Axe, you know.
Yeah, every time. I mean, we've had these compilations since the PlayStation 2.
Which, to its credit, is what the SEGA Genesis Mini, I think, is trying to correct.
That's fair.
Because it's got a lot of unique games.
Which, I mean, we had done a video previously discussing how they weren't that unique at the time, but...
Then they added the rest of them.
I do have to say, you know, although like probably 50% of the library is similar to these compilations, it is making some strides.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that I can buy it and play Mega Man Wily Wars is awesome, because and then I believe they have a version. Is it Darius that they have on there now? Is it something like that? They're like recreating one of those games?
I don't know if it's being recreated, but I know that the options as far as like the games that they're offering are a lot different. You got your Castlevania, you know. There's also a difference between the Japanese and the American version of the Sega Genesis Mini.
Yeah.
Mini.
It's just, you know, and I think the takeaway here is the fact that this was like Sega's launching point, and it almost seemed like with the Genesis, Sega could do anything. Now, not to talk about the Saturn or the Dreamcast, but like this was like definitely their peak, and you know, definitely where like getting on board with Sega was like was good. It was like the thing to do, you know.
The Genesis was and still remains cool.
Yeah, it's my favorite console.
From a hardware standpoint, I think or aesthetically rather, I think it's just beautiful.
Yeah, especially then you got the add-ons, which I don't really talk about like the games on the add-ons that much, but like they definitely added a certain life to the console, and then like a unique value for the console, and like putting those on there, you know, like it's just it's.
Can we take a moment and appreciate the box art as well?
Yeah, look, dude, the clamshell boxes.
They're the best boxes.
They are the best. I have some of those still laying around here. Meanwhile, cardboard boxes die very easily.
Who still has a 64 box?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not raising my hand.
Yeah, and man, the Sega boxes are they're so like good for putting on display.
You know that feeling when you make like your thumbnail, like for your channel, and it's like it's yours.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like every time I see a Sega Genesis clamshell.
You're right. I have a clamshell of Samurai Showdown around here, and I fucking love it. It's so pretty.
They really are. They're collector porn.
And they're a good reason to also get into playing Genesis. Or you sent me a copy. I mean, how not talk about this? You sent me a copy of Shadow of the Beast, and that came not only with the clamshell case, but with a poster. The fucking poster, dude. Mm-hmm. It's so good. It's so cool.
Yeah, and it's mature almost, like the posters too. Also, like the look, like the feel, the style. It's grid based. Like you see, like the actual grid on the clamshells themselves. Some are red, you know.
Yeah,
of course I get that. But you know, just the logo, Genesis. It's there. It's proud. The Genesis is a solid all around, like to collect for, to play games on, and to experience.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, I don't want to talk about the EA games too much, but I think about that and Lotus Turbo Challenge. I was thinking about the EA games too, like a Desert Strike and all those games, and Road Rash.
You know, the library is actually like, because, you know, we talk about the Wii. The Wii had 1,300 games, and then the Genesis only has 900. But which system do you feel like has more games?
The Genesis.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's not all garbage.
Yeah, it's so unique. Desert Strike, I hadn't even thought about that.
That's a good game.
It's a cheap game if you want to get it today, but it's a good game.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm saying. Like, buying games for, like, the NES or the SNES, like, it's going to cost you a little bit, especially if you want some of the good stuff. But buying games for the Genesis, there are some good, cheap-ass games out there.
So, I get that, and I get like the collector's appeal, but there's a lot of guys out there who probably are going to listen to this and be like, well, you know what? I don't need to collect for the system because I can emulate. What would you say to them?
Fuck you. I'm just kidding. No.
Come on, don't do that.
I would say yes, you can emulate, or you can just play the collections. But there's a certain. It's the same thing with like playing Atari. There's a certain authenticity to owning the console, the actual console, seeing the way it looks, buying the games with their unique clamshell like boxes and their really unique art on the cartridge. Like it's you can't replicate that. Any way you try, you cannot replicate that.
That's fair. And as someone who got a Genesis, who got my own Genesis for the first time, maybe 6 years ago, and who got a second one, same model, but like along with Castlevania Bloodlines and a bunch of games for it, and has gotten a couple CRT TVs. I can say that I've really enjoyed collecting for it. Now, I understand, we're in the modern era where you have to get a CRT TV off Craigslist. And, I understand if that's a hassle, you don't want to go through that. And also if like, you're just like, well, you know what? There's no place for a CRT in my home. To each their own. I barely use my CRT by comparison to even my HD TVs, but if you haven't experienced it, it's something that you should experience, that you kind of owe yourself, especially if you've made it this far in the podcast, because that means like you're all about your buttons and you're all about your mapping. So I mean, you might as well start mapping on your Genesis.
Even if you don't want to go that far to get like a TV that would that works with it and stuff, there are other choices. You can still collect Genesis games. You can just use other consoles, I guess, because like they have like I think the analog whatever MD like Mega Drive one just came out recently. That was like a really high end like HD version of the Genesis, and then they had, of course, the Retron 5. It's been out forever.
Besides that, you do have your compilations and the Genesis Mini.
Yeah, like there are options, and so you can get into the Genesis in many different ways. How many Super Nintendo compilations do you see? Just
Zero.
Just the
Zero.
Just the SNES Classic.
That was it, and I wouldn't even call that a compilation. That's just like
a mini console.
It's a mini console that was building off a hype train for the NES Mini.
Yeah, so like the fact that Sega will even re-release like all these games, like classic games worth like some of those like Streets of Rage games are worth so much money, and you could buy it for like $40 along with a ton of other games.
Or you could re-experience it in the modern era over Wi-Fi with a friend.
Yeah, over Wi-Fi. And it's got some of those, like, it's got like Gunstar Heroes on the PS4 collection and stuff. Like,
jeez. Oh, gosh, just keep throwing these great names at me.
This is going good, man. This is so good.
Love it.
I don't even know. I mean, like, it's hard to pinpoint who the Genesis is for because there's such a vast audience.
I mean, if I was going to be honest, it's for gamers.
It's for the gamers, keeping it real.
It's for gamers. Yeah. If you're a gamer and you love your Genesis, which I mean go hand in hand, tell us some of your favorites.
Yeah. Next week we'll be back with a hidden gems video for the Genesis.
Yeah, just go check it out on an MJR.
Yeah, we'll be here today. I have with me Teddy, and we are doing the hidden gems for the Genesis. Teddy, tell me about the Genesis.
Columns.
Okay.
Columns 3.
God.
Is a console. Oh my god, I'm done.
Oh, okay. Well, see you guys next time.
Yeah, bye.
Hey y'all, don't forget to subscribe to them button mappers.